Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, January 26th. U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to slap a 100% tariff on Canadian goods if Canada moves forward with a trade deal with China. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said, quote, "If Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the U.S." This comes following Prime Minister Mark Carney announcing what he called a strategic partnership with China, including plans to reduce tariffs. At the time, Trump actually called the move a good thing.
Minister Carney is in China. Prime Minister Carney is in China. How do you see the deals Canada and China have just signed, trade deals between the two partners?
Well, that's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
But the tensions between the two countries appear to be rising. Just days ago, Carney said in a speech in Davos that the U.S.-led world order has been ruptured. Trump continued to voice his displeasure on Sunday afternoon, arguing on his Truth Social account that, quote, "China is successfully and completely taking over the once great country of Canada. So sad to see this happen." And U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent sharply criticized Prime Minister Mark Carney's decision last week to roll back industry-specific tariffs on Chinese goods following Carney's visit to Beijing. Bessent warned the move could have serious implications for North American manufacturing, noting that many components used in auto production crossed the border during the manufacturing process 6 times. In response, Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada has no intention of pursuing a free trade agreement with China. Speaking to reporters Sunday morning in Ottawa, Carney pointed to trade areas such as Chinese-made electric vehicles, agriculture, and fish products, saying Canada is being clear about its position.
Well, the first thing is that Canada respects our engagements, our commitments. Il y a des engagements dans l'ACM. We have commitments under CUSMA that not to pursue free trade agreements with non-market economies without prior notification. We have no intention of doing that with China or any other non-market economy. What we've done with China is to rectify some issues that developed in the last couple of years. In many respects, we're going, to use the expression, back to the future with respect to EVs, with respect to agriculture, with respect to fish products and other food products, but with additional protections. So, for example, back in 2023, we didn't have a cap on the number of EVs. We didn't have a requirement for a large proportion of those EVs to be affordable, highly affordable EVs for Canadians. So it's entirely consistent with CUSMA, with our obligations, which we very much respect under CUSMA and will continue to work that way forward.
Carney also stressed that Canada remains committed to the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement, which requires member countries to notify one another before pursuing a free trade deal with a non-market country, including China. Justice Minister Sean Fraser reacted to Trump's latest threat, saying that the government is focusing more on building up the domestic economy than what Trump posts on social media.
Oh, look, we got to focus on making sure that we take care of things at home. I think the last couple of months in particular have demonstrated to us that the plan that we've broadcasted is the right one. We need to build an economy that can stand on its own 2 feet, making it easier to do big things at home and diversifying into new markets around the world. This is interesting and challenging times ahead for the Canadian economy, but with the path that the Prime Minister's laid out and, frankly, the buy-in for Canadians in every part of the country, I'm excited about what the next few months are going to look like.
Are you concerned by the tweet, new tariff?
Look, I try not to focus too much on tweets that you see on social media. I try to focus on the policies that we can put in place to but I'm focused on the policies that are going to support Canadian workers, and regardless of what others and other countries may have to say.
Andrew Donaldson, an editor at OrdinaryTimes.com, joined us for more on the U.S.'s tariff threat. Now, Andrew, historically, the president hasn't been able to unilaterally implement tariffs like this. How did we get here where tariff policy can be decided by as simple as a tweet?
Because President Trump decided to do it, and nobody, specifically Congress, who has the enumerated power to do things like tariffs and treaties and so forth, hasn't done anything to stop him. He's doing this under emergency power. The president does have emergency power to do things shortly to make things happen like this, but where's the emergency? And then you have things like the Treasury Secretary going on TV and going, well, the emergency is we're trying to avoid the emergency, paraphrasing it slightly. That's what it is. Donald Trump, remember, his whole life has been in finance. The financial world is his world, according to his POV, and this is the way to make the world revolve around him, and he's using tariffs to do it, threatening tariffs, everything from foreign policy decisions, military decisions, DOD, and now things like spats with Canada and other world leaders. He just threatens a tariff and everybody reacts to it. So that's how we got here. It's an emergency power. Congress could take it back whenever they want to. The Republican-dominated House of Representatives isn't going to do that, and here we be.
And what happens if the Supreme Court rules that many of these tariffs are unlawful?
Well, we don't know because we haven't done this before, but we can assume a couple things. I don't think Donald Trump's going to just go, oh, my bad, and stop doing it. I think he'll find other ways to do it. There is a lot of legalese involved in here about they did take in revenue from this tariffs, both on paper and in real life. What do we do with all that? And again, this is something, and the theme of the Roberts Court for quite a while now has usually been Congress needs to deal with this. So they're going to probably write something in there like, we're going to rule this way, but Congress needs to deal with this, paraphrasing, of course. And Congress is probably not going to deal with it, especially in an election year. So it's going to end up kind of in this doom loop of President Trump and the administration will adjust. Congress will be told to do something about it. They probably won't, and will probably press on. And until something electorally changes in America, I don't think Donald Trump's going to back off his tariffs.
And how likely is it that the Democrats will win the House? And if they do, could they remove Trump's tariff policy? What would that look like?
Well, the House of Representatives can pass legislation, but then it's got to get through the Senate. So do they get the House of Representatives and the Senate? Then you got something going. The Senate is not in their favor just electorally on the map. Now, it could get so catastrophically bad they get the Senate, but that would be a very high bar to clear. If they just get the House and not the Senate, you're going to see a lot of gridlock. They can slow a lot of things down. They can stop a lot of things. Remember, they'll have investigatory powers. If they get the House, they will impeach Donald Trump and various peoples in the administration again, because they've already done it twice, and they'll probably run on doing so again. So they can gum up the works, but as far as actually passing repeals and taking back that power, they would have to have not only the Senate, but a majority in the Senate that could get past the filibuster. So they either have to nuke that or get that many seats. That ain't going to happen. So I think gridlock's probably their best bet to try to slow down this administration if they can do what historically should happen and they get the House of Representatives back in a favorable environment.
Now, I want to go back a little bit. When Prime Minister Mark Carney first made this deal with China, President Donald Trump came out and actually said that it was a good idea and good that Canada was going out and networking. Why do you think we're seeing a change in tone all of a sudden?
Frankly, the president has a habit, first with Prime Minister Trudeau and now with Prime Minister Carney, when he wants to punch down and bully somebody, he looks to our friends to the north, to Canada. And because there's not a lot of repercussions for doing that. Now, economically, we know long-term there will be, but to him personally in the moment, there has not been. And it's really a shame because if you think about it, both presidents and the prime minister, they have kind of the similar problem. They need to talk about affordability. You saw Prime Minister Carney rolling out a series of packages today that he wants to try to do. President Trump has the same problem. Both of them are having trouble with the Parliament and the Congress, respectively, trying to get stuff pushed through as far as affordability and economic things go. So the big win, both PR and economically, would be for those two leaders to work together in one of the most integrated economies between two large countries in the world, Canada and the U.S., and go, we're going to have these big trade deals and we're going to help both economies and it's going to help affordability. But President Trump, two prime ministers in a row now, likes to punch down at Canada. And Prime Minister Carney was elected specifically to stand up against Donald Trump. So I don't think we're going to get the obvious thing that would be best for the people of both countries. The politics are going to get in the way of that. And the thing with China, Donald Trump has a lot of whiplash policy stuff with China where he'll praise President Xi Jinping, but at the same time talk about China in the abstract like they're the big bad. So what does this one specific deal that Prime Minister Carney was talking about where it comes to basically canola oil and EV vehicles, it's not that big a deal. President Trump decided to make it a big deal. And here we go again, where he's just throwing tariffs at something to try to insert himself in the situation and get something that he wants. What he wants, though, is ambiguous and something Prime Minister Carney can't give him.
And given that so much could change in the coming months, was it smart for Mark Carney to indirectly call Trump out like he did in Davos?
He doesn't really have a choice. He was elected to stand up to Donald Trump. Remember, that election flipped almost overnight when we started with the annex in Canada, 51st state, all that stuff. We all saw the poll numbers and how that election turned out. So he has a mandate to push back against President Trump in the states as far as the Canadian voters go. So he doesn't really have a choice. And economically, he's in a tough spot because while what he said in his speech was wonderful and drew a lot of praise about getting a conglomeration of middle powers, there's no grouping of middle powers that can economically replace what the United States and what President Trump specifically is threatening to do to Canada. He has to talk to places like China. He has to talk to middle powers. He has to reach out to the EU to try to do that. So he is in a really rough spot here where America is always going to be the most important ally to Canada, but right now it's an unreliable, and with the Trump administration, an adversarial partner that he has to deal with. He has to stand up with him, but he also has to understand that there's only 2 or 3 more years to go with this administration, and maybe less if Congress starts gumming up the works. If he can hang in there a little while, I think that's why you see him kind of hedging both sides of Canada has to have a broader plan, because what if the next president is a J.D. Vance that is a continuation of the Trump policies?
A man shot and killed by federal agents in Minneapolis has been identified by his family as 37-year-old Alex Preddy. Preddy, who worked as an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA healthcare system and had no serious criminal history, was fatally shot by U.S. Border Patrol agents on Saturday morning during an immigration enforcement operation. Bystander videos reviewed by multiple outlets appear to show Preddy holding a phone, not a weapon, as he moved to help a fellow protester who had been pushed to the ground by agents. The video you are about to see may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Go! What the is wrong with you? The people! The is wrong with you? Honestly! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
However, federal officials are arguing that a Border Patrol agent fired in self-defense after Preddy allegedly approached officers with a handgun and resisted attempts to disarm him, though video footage and witness accounts show conflicting details about what happened in the moments before the shooting.
Individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds. He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. About hundreds of protesters then showed up at the scene. They began to obstruct and to assault law enforcement officers. We saw objects being thrown at them, including ice and other objects. And a rampant assault began, and even an HSI officer agent's finger was bitten off. Crowd control measures were deployed to bring safety to the public and to law enforcement at the scene. And once again, I want to remind everybody that this situation and this tragedy did not have to happen. Our law enforcement are doing everything that they can to protect the public. We're praying for this deceased loved one's family and friends, but we also recognize that the Minnesota governor and the Minneapolis mayor need to take a long, hard look in the mirror. They need to evaluate their rhetoric, their conversations, and their encouragement of such violence against our citizens and our law enforcement officers.
Pressure mounted on Donald Trump's administration to fully investigate the killing by federal immigration officers of Alex Preddy. At a news conference, Governor Tim Walz again called on the Trump administration to halt immigration enforcement operations in Minnesota.
If it was the intention of Donald Trump to make an example of Minnesota, then I'm damn proud of the example that the world's seeing. We believe in law and order in this state. We believe in peace. And we believe that Donald Trump needs to pull these 3,000 untrained agents out of Minnesota before they kill another person. And we're up here telling another story of a Minnesotan just trying to live their life without the interference. To Americans who are watching this right now, and I don't know, maybe you're watching it with curiosity, bewilderment, horror, scorn, or sympathy. I've got a question for all of you. What side do you want to be on? The side of an all-powerful federal government that can kill, injure, menace, and kidnap its citizens off the streets? Or on the side of a nurse at the VA hospital who died bearing witness to such government? Or the side of a mother whose last words were, "I'm not mad at you"? You're allowed to decide at any point that you're not with this anymore. If you voted for this administration, heck, even if you thought Operation Metro Surge was a good idea, sounded like the thing to do a month ago, you're still allowed to look at what's happening here in Minnesota and say, this isn't what I voted for and this isn't what I want. So my question is, what's the plan, Donald Trump? What is the plan? What do we need to do to get these federal agents out of our state? You thought fear, violence, and chaos is what you wanted from us, and you clearly underestimated the people of this state and nation.
And former President Barack Obama called the killing a heartbreaking tragedy and as a, quote, wake-up call to every American, regardless of party, that many of our core values as a nation are increasingly under assault. Large protests spread across U.S. cities, including Minneapolis, New York City, San Francisco, Boston, and Providence, Rhode Island. In Minneapolis, crowds braved extreme cold to rally at the site of Preddy's death, denouncing ICE and federal tactics. Elsewhere, activists in cities such as San Francisco rallied in solidarity with Minneapolis, demanding an end to ICE and criticizing federal immigration policy. Hundreds marched through downtown areas holding signs and calling for accountability. The protests reflect growing national anger over federal enforcement tactics and the death of 2 Minneapolis residents. While demonstrations continue over federal enforcement tactics in the United States, the auto industry is also making headlines. According to new reporting from the Globe and Mail, a major Chinese automaker is looking to set up shop in Canada and even attempt to recruit Canadian auto executives. Our contributor, David Clement, has more.
Chinese automaker Chery is actively recruiting Canadian auto professionals to launch sales operations in Canada following Prime Minister Mark Carney's controversial trade deal with Beijing. The Globe and Mail has confirmed that multiple industry veterans have been contacted by recruiters working for Chery, which is China's third largest automaker and top vehicle exporter. The recruitment messages indicate that the company plans to open a Toronto area office to hire for all key roles needed to establish a full sales operation from scratch. The timing follows Carney's announcement of a deal slashing Canadian tariffs on Chinese EVs from 100% to just 6.1%. The agreement allows for 49,000 Chinese EVs into Canada annually, with that number rising to 70,000 within 5 years. Now, this represents a dramatic reversal. Canada imposed its 100% tariff on Chinese EVs in late 2024, coordinating with similar U.S. measures to counter what Ottawa called unfair competition from Chinese manufacturers who benefit from lax labor law and environmental standards. The deal has sparked fierce criticism. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called for a consumer boycott of Chinese-made EVs, arguing the agreement undermines domestic manufacturers. Canadian auto industry officials questioned whether Ottawa actually considered the impact on homegrown production. For now, Chery appears determined to be the first mainstream Chinese car company selling directly to Canadian consumers. The company sold 2.6 million vehicles globally in 2025 and operates in 47 countries, including Britain, Italy, Australia, and Mexico. However, major questions remain unanswered. The federal government hasn't clarified how the quota will be divided or which companies will participate. If the 49,000 vehicles include cars already imported from China, like Volvos or Polestars made there, little room remains for new entrants. If it's an entirely new allocation, one or two Chinese brands could establish viable operations in Canada. Industry analyst Andrew King notes the immediate beneficiaries may actually be Tesla and Volvo. Tesla could import its Model 3 from Shanghai, avoiding the 25% tariff on US-made versions, potentially reviving sales that plummeted 60% in 2025. The broader context here complicates matters. EV sales have cooled as government subsidies ended, raising questions about market viability. Yet Chery's aggressive recruitment suggests confidence that Canadians will welcome more affordable EV options despite political opposition. The Prime Minister's office promised the deal will drive Chinese joint venture investment and create manufacturing jobs within 3 years. But they haven't provided specifics about companies, investments, or even locations. For now, Chery isn't waiting for clarity. Whether its gamble succeeds may depend as much on political wins as consumer preferences, and with the provincial premier calling for boycotts and industry groups voicing concern about the path forward.
Canadian veterans are criticizing U.S. President Donald Trump's recent comments about NATO soldiers in Afghanistan, calling them a great deal of disrespect towards those who were killed while serving. In an interview with Fox News on Thursday, Trump downplayed the role of NATO partners, saying we never needed them.
I think, but I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test. And I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
The remarks have sparked strong reactions from veterans and allies who say they overlook the sacrifices made by Canadian and other NATO forces in Afghanistan. Defense Minister David McGuinty said that Canadians will never forget the sacrifices that their troops have made for Americans and the NATO alliance in Afghanistan.
I'd like to make a statement, and I want to be clear and direct. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, working with the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces is as humbling as much as it is an honor. The sacrifice and commitment to Canada of our sailors, our soldiers, and our aviators is unmatched. They are second to none. When the Twin Towers were hit on 9/11, where 24 Canadians died, Canada launched Operation Yellow Ribbon, taking in air traffic from the United States to help protect lives. Canadian firefighters headed for Manhattan almost immediately. We joined the Americans and other NATO allies on the day operations were launched in Afghanistan. There was only standing side by side in solidarity. Over 150 of our own soldiers made the ultimate sacrifice. We will never forget what they did for Canada and for our NATO allies.
And Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne pushed back against U.S. President Donald Trump's latest comments on U.S. allies in Afghanistan as an attempt to rewrite the history books. And Prince Harry and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer have also criticized the U.S. president's recent remarks about NATO troops in Afghanistan. Harry, who served twice in Afghanistan in 2008 and 2012 as a British Army captain, said in a statement that when NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in its history to assist U.S. forces, America's allies answered that call. Both the Prince and the Prime Minister emphasized the contributions and sacrifices of NATO troops alongside American forces in Afghanistan.
Start by paying tribute to the 457 of our armed services who lost their lives in Afghanistan. I will never forget their courage, their bravery, and the sacrifice that they made for their country. There are many also who were injured, some with life-changing injuries. And so I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling. And I'm not surprised they've caused such hurt to the loved ones of those who were killed or injured, and in fact, across the country.
She has said that you need to be tougher with President Trump and demand an apology from him. Will you call for an apology from the president?
Well, I've made my position clear, and what I say to Diane is if I had misspoken in that way or said those words, I would certainly apologise, and I'd apologise to her.
And that message of frustration got through to U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump praised UK soldiers a day after receiving a rare rebuke from United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer. In an apparent bid to ease tensions with Starmer, Trump took to social media on Saturday to acknowledge that 457 UK soldiers had died in Afghanistan, with many others badly wounded, describing them as being among the greatest of all warriors. While Trump's response stopped short of an apology, his olive branch came after he spoke to the UK leader earlier on Saturday, according to a statement from Starmer's office. As questions mount about the resilience of the U.S. economy in an increasingly interconnected world, concerns are growing over potential vulnerabilities in Washington's financial system. From the influence of major foreign investors to the resilience on the dollar as a global safe haven, experts are weighing the practical implications of global markets reacting to American fiscal and monetary policies. We're now joined by Brendan Caldwell, director of Caldwell Securities Limited, to unpack how shifts in international investment could ripple through U.S. markets, affect borrowing costs, and challenge the long-held perception of economic stability. Brendan, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. It'll be interesting conversation. As I think everything everybody thought to be true, if it ever were true, is probably not true today. But let's dive into it.
Well, when we ask, could Europe shake the U.S. economy, Washington has a weakness. What exactly is that weakness? Is it fiscal dependence on foreign buyers, political gridlock, or overconfidence in the dollar's safe haven status?
Yeah, among them. And as your earlier segment just said, a president who's prone to saying just about anything, no matter who it offends. Not that it, like, obviously he's wrong. I mean, the comment was about U.S. allies not doing very much in Afghanistan, and the 450 plus British soldiers that died in Afghanistan, the 150 plus Canadian soldiers that died in Afghanistan bear testament to the sheer nonsense of what he's saying. But that's Trump. He says nonsense. So U.S. has a lot of weaknesses, not least of which they have someone in charge who says stuff. But what the U.S. does have is they have someone in charge. Europe, by contrast, has never been united. The EU was created to be a united front to rival in size and economic power the United States. And because it has never really, and also militarily, and his point, he was overstating the case, Donald Trump was, but Europe has relied heavily on the United States to defend it over the last 60 or 80 years. That's a fair point. So economically, organizationally, militarily, I think Europe does have weaknesses that it needs to either come together or risk splintering altogether in the face of challenges which are now even larger than the United States, as, say, China is coming of age as a world economic power, potentially rivaling that of the U.S. I have my doubts there, but there are more players on the scene now. And for Europe to survive, they cannot be nations of 60, 50, 40, 100 million people. There needs to be a united front of several hundred million to meet the challenges.
And we're hearing warnings that global investors could weaponize American stocks and bonds. In practical terms, what would coordinated selling big foreign holders actually look like on U.S. markets in a bad week?
It's an interesting thing. Taking a very Canadian perspective on it, we have shown in a little area that we can make a difference if we decide that we're just so put off by what's going on south of the border. We stopped buying their alcohol. We stopped buying Napa Valley wines. We stopped buying Kentucky bourbon. And it's a bit of a testament to our livers that as a country, we can, by our stopping drinking, at least wines from a particular place or booze from a particular place, that it can have a material economic impact on those regions. So comparing small things to great, and returning to my earlier point, Canada has got a very unified perspective on how we feel about being called the 51st state. To the extent that these little digs and economic slights and indeed straight up economic attacks, if not military attacks, do unite the world, it is possible to have a material economic impact on the United States. Now, whether the world can be united is another matter. America fought a long and bloody war to make sure that it always stayed in one piece. And Canada, still 100 and, what is it now, 50 plus years later, haven't really come to terms with our being a coherent economic or political union. So it remains to be seen. I do think, though, even if they did sell U.S. treasuries, even if they did sell U.S. stocks, one of the things America would like to have is a weaker U.S. dollar. They berate other countries for artificially weakening their currencies, and yet it's been, at least over the last year, a bit of a race to the bottom with the U.S. dollar, and that's not been unintentional.
And Brendan, how real is the risk that Canada, Europe, China, and others slowly diversify away from buying American?
Well, a keychain example is Canada. We decided, in the face of being called the 51st state, to stop buying American alcohol. And that's had a material impact on Napa Valley and Kentucky bourbon production, Napa Valley wine production and Kentucky bourbon. And you wouldn't think that if a whole country decides to not buy American wine, and it would be a big deal, but it has been. The question is whether the whole world can unite to create the outcome that they're looking for. And the question is, what is that outcome? Are they hoping for a weaker U.S. dollar by selling U.S. treasuries? Well, if they are, that's something that the president is looking for as well, because while they talk about a strong greenback, a strong U.S. dollar, they actually want it weaker to stimulate U.S. exports, because that's really what this is about, both collecting money from tariffs for the federal government, but also stimulating the U.S. economy through production of goods and services. So we shall see.
Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a 25% increase to the GST credit, aimed at helping lower-income Canadians cope with the rising cost of groceries. The temporary boost, branded as the Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit, will begin this year and run for 5 years. The federal government will also provide a one-time payment worth 50% of the credit this year. Carney made the announcement at a grocery store in Ottawa as members of Parliament returned to the House of Commons following the winter break.
Starting this year, we're taking the existing GST credit amount and raising it by 25% for 5 years. And in addition, we're providing a one-time payment equivalent to 50% of the GST credit this year. So what does that mean? Well, right now, a family of 4 receives about $1,100 a year with the existing GST credit. With the new Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit, that same family will receive up to $1,890 this year and about $1,400 a year for each of the next 4 years. A single person receives about $540 a year with the existing credit. With the new benefit, that person will receive up to $950 this year and about $700 a year for the next 4 years. On average, these payments make up for the higher level of food prices since the pandemic.
Manitoba says it has recruited 13 U.S.-trained physicians to work in communities across the province as part of efforts to improve access to family doctors and reduce wait times. In a statement released Friday, the province said that the doctors were brought in through Manitoba's Healthcare Retention and Recruitment Office, aimed at easing pressure on an overburdened healthcare system. The new recruits are part of a broader push that saw 285 doctors join Manitoba's healthcare system in 2025.
We've recruited 13 American physicians as part of our recruitment and retention efforts. So to paraphrase what it says at the Statue of Liberty, give us your poor, give us your weary, give us your Americans yearning to be free. At this time in the world, everyone sees what's going on in the United States, and we're very proud here in Manitoba to accept people as they are, to celebrate inclusion and diversity, and to keep our doors open to the world. We're also very proud as Canadians to have a free, universal, public health care system This is the fundamental Canadian value, and this is the fact that differentiates us from the United States. And it will always be this way. So, we're investing in improving public health care here in Manitoba, hiring physicians, recruiting nurses, healthcare aides, respiratory therapists, allied health professionals, everyone, support staff included. And we're launching a new layer of healthcare through services like medinav.ca. People talk about the emergency rooms and the hospitals. We're working on that. But today, using a digital health card or plastic health card, you can book an appointment to see a physician or a nurse practitioner without ever having to go to the waiting room. You can do that online. So we're bringing Manitoba healthcare into the modern era, but we are standing with Canadian values that are timeless.
A historic partnership has been announced that will see the next generation of AI data centers developed on Indigenous land in Canada. It is a collaboration between AMD and CyberCloud AI. The founders include Josephine Niker, Dr. Tina Starlight with the Tsuut'ina Nation, and Daniel Mistaken-Chief with the Kaurna First Nation. Supporters say this groundbreaking initiative will play a crucial role in securing Canada's digital sovereignty. Our Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts caught up with Josephine Niker of CyberCloud AI, who is helping to spearhead the campaign and has all of the details.
Josephine, where will these data centers be built specifically, and when are you hoping they'll be fully operational?
So, Al, they'll be built across Canada on Indigenous land, and we're actually following a phased approach. So, we're going to have some of the compute come online within the 2026 period, and then additional phases rolling out through from 2027 and beyond. So, really, we're following the demand. So, as demand ramps up, we will continue to put more compute online.
At this point, do you know what the cost will be and where will the funding come from?
Sure. So the cost, we've currently done a cost on several of our phases, including our 100 megawatts, and we're looking at around 1.5 billion. And we've already managed to secure a international investor. And, they've come across with 400 million already. And so they are actually the Lancaster Group, and they're based out of, Europe. And in fact, they don't only come with the investment, they actually are involved in large-scale infrastructure projects, rail. And so they also come with that know-how that really makes the partnership, quite strong. We're also speaking to the Canadian Strategic Response Fund, and we believe that they have quite a powerful position to really unlock the digital and economic sovereignty within Canada. And so even the Major Projects Office, we're currently being reviewed by that office as well. Which is really put in place by the Prime Minister's office to deal with complex and nation-building infrastructure projects.
So, Josephine, when it comes to a lot of AI data computers here, you're going to need a lot of water as well. You really have to keep things cool. Will you have access to enough water to ensure that infrastructure is not damaged?
So, Hal, we actually are really in this instance making sure that we have all of our projects. We view it through an Indigenous values lens, right? Which is really a strong commitment to protecting Mother Earth. And what that means for us is with our cooling system, we're using the closed loop cooling, which actually reduces water within the system quite significantly, actually. And what this allows is that, or ensures that we're not competing with communities for water resources. So we've really considered that and made sure that we're going to use that closed loop cooling system.
So how will these AI data centers really support Canadian businesses and researchers?
Absolutely. And so one of the major problems globally and for Canada as well is that we have a shortage of compute, right? And so compute is really that brain power behind AI. And so for us, we want to make sure that we're going to increase that, compute within Canada so that it can really unlock, innovation, increase economic growth. So if you look at Canadian businesses, the ability to really build and scale AI products needs compute. Researchers within the science, the health, climate sectors, they need compute in order to have these, discoveries and to have, improve healthcare. And even in the public sector, we require secure Canadian-built infrastructure in order to really unlock that productivity that all of us have been talking about.
So how will this initiative really support Canadian data sovereignty?
So data sovereignty is a big piece. I mean, we all have been listening to Prime Minister Carney's address at Davos, and he did highlight sovereignty as well. So for us, what we have done is we've looked at all the pieces within the technology stack for data centers, and we have made sure that each of those pieces are Canadian built. And so the entire infrastructure that we are proposing for the compute is actually on Canadian land. Governance is in Canada. And so that entire supply chain is somewhat controlled within Canada.
Josephine Niker, co-founder of CyberCloud AI, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Hal.
Connor Story and Hudson Williams took part in the Milano Cortina 2026 Olympic torch relay in Italy on Sunday. Wearing pink and white tracksuits, the heated rivalry stars carried the torch through the route, drawing cheers from the local crowd as the relay continues towards its February 6th finish in Milan ahead of the Winter Games.
Indietro per favore, indietro, grazie. Grazie mille. Stare dietro. Grazie mille. Go, Patrick, go. We got it. Over here. Thank you. A bit closer. No.
I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Good night, Canada.